am Rebecca Spector. I am the Executive Director of Tri-Valley Conservancy. And hopefully most of you know that we are Livermore's nonprofit land trust. And we preserved over 6,000 acres of land in Livermore and Pleasanton, and many of those acres are on vineyard lands. I want to just quickly acknowledge our TVC board of directors, many of whom are here tonight. If you could please stand and let's give them an applause for their service. We also have a lot of past TVC board members who gave many years of service. So if you all could please stand as well, past TVC board members, please. Dave, Lori. So you can see TVC has been representing this community for 30 years. So why are we holding this forum? We started getting a number of calls about a month ago, several months ago, people asking what's going on, why are vineyards being pulled out, and what can and cannot be done on some of these lands, which, we see your signs, we know some of our under easement. So we thought it would be a good idea to bring together some of experts in the field, from the Winegrowers Association, from some of the leading winery owners, and TVC to let you know what's going on, and an opportunity for you all to ask some questions. As you know, the vineyards and the wineries here in South Livermore, they don't just produce wine, they produce local livelihoods, tourism, tax revenue, and community gatherings. Everything from local meetings, parties, to date nights, family events, and weddings which bring people from around the world, and we're all super proud of that. So just a show of hands, how many people have lived in Livermore for less than 5 years? Great. 5 to 10 years? 10 to 20 years? A lot of people, 10 to 20. More than 20 years. Wow, a lot of people, that's amazing. So we're all here tonight because we love this region where we work and live. So I just want to say thank you all for showing up. Just a minute about the format of the evening. So we're going to have 3 wonderful speakers who are going to speak for about 10 minutes each. Brandy Lombardi from the Winegrowers Association, David Kent from Kent Family Wineries, and Diana Roberts from Tri-Valley Conservancy. And then because there's so many of us, we're going to do curated Q&A. So on your tables, there's some index cards and pens. And Haley, who's from TVC, stand up in a red sweater. She'll be walking around periodically. And thank you, Haley, for helping organize this event, with a basket. And you can put your questions in there, and then people in the back will be curating them and handing them to me, and then we'll be having curated questions at the end. And then after that, we've decided, it's Livermore, but do we want wine before the event or after the event? So we did make an executive decision to do it after the event. But please stay afterwards for conversation, which will continue over wine, and we have cheese boards. So there will be opportunity for everybody to talk and gather and share their concerns. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Brandy Lombardi. Brandy's the Executive Director of the Livermore Valley Winegrowers Association, where she leads initiatives to promote and strengthen one of California's oldest wine regions. She works closely with wineries, growers, and community partners to elevate the region's visibility, support member success, and enhance visitor engagement. With nearly 18 years experience and a strong background in hospitality, marketing, and community collaboration, Brandy's dedicated to advancing the Livermore Valley as a premier wine destination. So please welcome Brandy Lombardi.
Thank you, Becky. Well, I was very excited to get the call from Becky to be able to come here and speak to you all about Livermore Valley, the vineyards, the wineries, and what's happening. I get calls at my office just like Becky was getting calls at hers about what's going on with the vineyards that are being planted or ripped out, or what's happening, and everyone wants to know that answer. But first, I felt it was really important that I gave you an important quick overview of what's happening in the industry as a whole, because Livermore is one piece of the wine industry. It's not the whole piece in our state, our country, or the world. And there's a lot going on. For those of you that keep your finger on the pulse of the wine industry, we just came off the heels of Unified Wine Symposium in Sacramento. That's an annual event where they give the state of the wine industry, state of the industry address, and we have experts and lots of projections, lots of analytics for us to see kind of what's happening in the wine region. And so I pulled a few highlights from that to share with you, so we can get you kind of up to speed with what we're listening to, where we're making our decisions from information and analytics we're getting as well. So some of the top points that came out of this year's Unified Wine Symposium was a shift towards planning and stabilization. With the 2026 symposium behind us now, the big shift isn't about reacting to disruptions or reacting to a decline in the wine industry, but rather planning for stabilization and future opportunities. That's what we've done in Livermore Valley Wine Country by forming the Wine Heritage District here. As many of you know, we are now in our renewal process for that, and it's been a very successful model for us to secure funding and secure the sustainability of our wine region, of our association that continues to have the mission of visitation strategy here in Livermore Valley for our wine country. Another big challenge is excess grape and wine supply. You've heard it, you've seen it on the news, it is not a secret that there is just too much in the industry right now on the market for consumers. There is also slowing down in wine consumption with the next generation coming up. They're very much into craft cocktails and things that have less carbs and allegedly less carbs. But I may be a tiny bit biased on that. But with that said, we are doing our best to look forward to figure out how to adjust to that overabundance of wine grapes and wine that our wineries have and our vineyards are trying to figure out when no one's buying their grapes. What do we do? And those are questions that have always been asked. This is not the first time this has happened in the wine industry, but it's very much a crisis for some wine regions. As a whole, there's numbers that have been thrown around anywhere from 9% up to, I've heard as much as 21% of a decline in the wine industry right now. Livermore Valley just had our annual report. We're down 2.81%, so less than industry as a whole, but still a decline. And so for us, we're trying to make sure that as being in Livermore, one of our biggest strengths is supporting the small businesses around us. Everybody loves going downtown. Everybody loves going to our small businesses. Your winery next door is a small business as well. And I think oftentimes we forget that they are boutique wineries that are trying to make it, and they are small businesses. So I think a lot of people call us asking what they can do, how they can change the landscape of what's happening. And I would say, before I pass it on to anybody else to talk tonight, I want to make sure that I remind you what you can do is visit our wineries. Visit those small businesses. Buy the wine for your special event directly from one of our wineries. And make sure that you're supporting them in any way you can to sustain the beautiful vineyards and wineries that are right here in front of us. And that's something that we can all do. And it's just a small step, but as we all know, it's every small step all of a sudden turns into something very big. Another thing is just the industry outlook of supply and demand. And the idea that you have to be planting, you have stuff that's planted, and then you have what's selling. And those don't always equal the same thing. So when you look at something, you know, I right outside my office is Thatcher Bay Vineyards. And they just ripped out their vineyard. And they are now replanting it with one of our signature varietals, which is super exciting. But that is because Sauv Blanc right now is one of the varietals that is not in decline. According to Unified Wine Symposium, it's one of the highest selling varietals right now in America. And so seeing that Livermore Valley has chosen two signature varietals of Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc, and that we have partners that are helping us to plant those varietals so that we can meet the market demand and make sure that we aren't sticking to something because it's what we thought we should do or because it's what we've always done, but that we're constantly looking at the trends and innovation to make sure that we are matching the demand to ensure the success of our vineyard owners and wineries. So that's just another example of how we are trying to look at something and not react, but respond. And that is what our wine country is committed to do. Another thing is making sure that we're looking at what consumer needs to be targeted. Because I have to tell you, how many of us when we were 21 were going out and buying a $50 bottle of wine? I know I wasn't. And so to remind ourselves that even though the big buzz is that no one in their early 20s are wine drinkers, well, I don't know that anyone in their early 20s has been for generations. There's a handful of us that were trying white Zin back in, oh God, I just really aged myself, didn't I? Forget I said that. I'm not that old. But all I'm gonna say is, I think that we have to not, again, be reactive. And I think that's the theme I want to have for tonight, is that we're all in this together. And we have small business owners who are doing the best they can to navigate some pretty strong headwinds there's ups and downs all the time in every industry. We are definitely on a down, but in that, it gives us the chance to plan, as I said earlier, for the stabilization and for the future. And I think that that's what we're trying to do. And there's other ways that we think we can do that as well, which is making sure that we communicate with all of you. And making sure that we communicate with the community so that we can stand against this headwind together and not separate and not as adversaries, but as people who are collaborative and as people who have the same shared vision of the sustainability of Livermore Valley wine country. Yours may be for one reason, a grower's may be for another, and a winery yet another. But as long as we're all moving in that path to sustain this beautiful wine country, I think we're going to be successful. And that's what my job is to make sure that we're communicating with the community as best we can. With that said, we also have a lot of commitment to the community. I'm looking out into this room and 5 of my board members are here. They're interested. They know that this is important. They know that this is an area that we want to continue to have a dovetail relationship with TVC, with the city of Livermore, and our community to make sure that when you have a question, the question gets answered. That it's not just in a black hole somewhere. And so that's why we're here tonight, and that's why it's important for us to continue to share with you what the industry is looking like, what the wineries are up against, and figure out together as we tackle that how to be successful and how to navigate it in a way that keeps us all here and that keeps our wine country thriving. With that said, I know that some of you are wanting just the straight up answers about why vineyards are getting pulled out. And I guarantee you that my good friend David Kent here is going to give you some history of Livermore and some great answers as a vineyard and winery owner. I will say we also have a viticultural consultant who's here tonight with us, Luca. He's over in the corner. He has also chosen to have one of the series. He has an vineyard educational series. And the second session of that is this exact topic. And he's going into great detail on that next Tuesday. So I put a flyer in the back at the check-in table. If you are interested in attending, that is open to the public. And if you'd like to do a deep dive into the science of what's going on, we wanted to make sure that we made that available to all of you who might want to do that. So please feel free to take that flyer from the back, as well as my business cards are back there. If you have other specific questions that might not get answered tonight, I wanted to make sure you all have my contact information, that it is an open door, and you can always email me and I will get back to you and try to answer the question or find someone who can if I can't. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to what's going on in the industry, the sentiments that our wine growers and winery owners have to want to do this together and to be partners in this so that we can all be successful. So thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. And I know many of you know David Kent. For those of you who don't, he's the Chief Executive Officer of Kent Family Estates, which has been American wine growers for 7 generations. The Kent family have been vineyard owners and winemakers in the Livermore Valley since 1996. And David is a former Chief Executive of the Wine Group, the world's 2nd largest producer by volume. David is also the former chair of the California Wine Institute, the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the Tri-Valley Conservancy. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Becky. I did write some notes, but I realize I'm too old now to read my own handwriting. But can you hear me in the back? Good. Better. Okay. Harrison, better? All right. Cool. Brandy, thank you for the overview of the wine industry. I think it's no surprise to anyone in this room that, this is a cyclical business and this is a very difficult time in the wine industry. However, there are unique aspects to Livermore that kind of don't necessarily always align with what's going on in the industry. Without a doubt, Livermore has done well when grapes are in short supply because it creates markets for our grapes outside of our own local wineries. But we weren't doing all that well when supply of grapes were in balance with demand. The vineyards have been coming out for a while, and they're going to continue to come out in a fairly substantial way. I think what we need to do, and what I'd like to just spend my time on, is talking about exactly structurally why that's happening and what we can do about it, what specifically Tri-Valley Conservancy and the Wine Growers Association are doing about it. And yes, as Becky indicated, my family's been here as wine growers for the past 30 years. We have 40 acres, no mule, not even a tractor. We push that out. We have Winty take care of our vineyards, as many people do. I can tell by the turnout tonight that you all share the same concern that my family has, which is, what is the future of our wine country here? And like you, it's with great sadness that I see my neighbors, friends and neighbors pulling out vineyards, sometimes perhaps sooner than they would otherwise have been removed. But as farmers, we understand the reality of this business, the business of cultivated agriculture. Every 20 to 40 years, depending on multiple factors, old vines will need to be pulled. And the soil needs to be left fallow for several years so it can regenerate and heal itself. And we're very pleased to have Luca Brilliante, the greatest name of an Italian viticulturalist, who really understands this intimately. And I hope you take advantage of him being in our community and helping us with vineyard issues. But the real question that our community faces is not if a vineyard is going to be pulled, because it's inevitable, they're going to be pulled, but whether or not that vineyard will ever be replanted. That's really the question we need to focus on tonight. This is a question that Livermore has been trying to answer for the past 50 years. Since my retirement from the corporate wine world, I've spent the last 10 years, a period my wife refers to as my flunking of retirement, trying to help TVC, put its thumb on the scale to make sure that we tilt the answer to yes. That yes, these fallowed vineyard lands are going to be replanted. So how did we get here? 50 years ago, our state water provider had actually zeroed out all future ag water for the Livermore Valley. The belief then, the assumption was that the farmland would be converted to housing and light industrial uses. This is what was done in San Jose, where all those neighboring towns, Hayward, Fremont, Union City, the vineyards, the orchards came out, and it basically became a single mass that we now know of as Silicon Valley. At the time, there were still about a dozen small wineries and two bigger ones in Livermore, and about 1,000 acres. But our community didn't want that vision. It didn't want for the Tri-Valley to become what had become in Silicon Valley. And so various leaders came together and said, look, we've got a different vision. We want to keep our towns distinct. We want open space and vineyards, other forms of open space surrounding them. And we want our Tri-Valley to have a distinct identity, the towns to be distinct, and that we have a working landscape around them. So the vision started with a great goal, an example of what we didn't want to be, and a hope of what we could be if we did it right. And that was the creation of the South Livermore Valley Area Plan. Inside the city of Livermore, that's known as the Specific Plan. It was created 30 years ago, and which was 25 years after Napa did a similar plan. And the goal was to preserve 5,000 acres of farmland and open space in South Livermore forever. And in a nutshell, it's a very complicated plan, but for every house that was going to be built, 1 acre of farmland had to be put into permanent conservation easement. And that land could never be developed for any higher density housing than 1 farm family per 20 acres or any other urban uses. The Tri-Valley Conservancy was formed to hold those easements, and the lands that were placed under those easements needed to be planted. There were a variety of crops, olives, pistachios, and wine grapes were the 3 that UC Davis determined to be the most suitable, and they had to be actively farmed for 8 years. And so things got off to a great start. In the first 10 years, we reached 4,000 acres, up from, I think, 1,000, 1,100 under vine. The California wine industry had already been booming for 10 years. That really turnaround started in 1992. Kendall Jackson needed coastal Chardonnay, and so we planted it here. And BV up in Napa needed Cabernet Sauvignon, so great contracts were given out, and we planted that here as well. Gallo, who was my employer at the time, needed Merlot, and so we planted Ruby Hill, and that was how things were going. You had large out-of-area wine giants that essentially needed certain things, and Livermore had available land and water to plant them. The problem was those were short-term fixes. At the same time, they're also planting those same grapes closer to their production facilities. And so what they need for, maybe 7 or even up to 10 years is not what they're going to need in a longer term period. And so, soon, we didn't prepare for the days when they wouldn't need our grapes anymore. I think some of the things Randy was talking about, which is the wine growers' focus on growing things that other people aren't growing, is really a key part. And I'll get back to that in a few minutes. But what was also clear was many of the things we're planting weren't necessarily the varieties that do best in the Livermore Valley. They were all good. We've got a great Mediterranean climate. We could grow virtually anything. But there were places where you could grow some of those grapes better or cheaper, and there was a market for both, higher quality and lower price than what we could do. And we weren't really focusing on the things that we in Livermore can do better than any other region. And if you want to have a long-term business that is good in the shortages and good in the balanced market and good in the long market, you really have to stay, as UC Davis told us, you have to stay away from the commodity grapes, and you need to do things that are unique to you. And so, cracks started to show as early as 2002. Vineyard planting stalled. The prices paid for Livermore grapes really stalled out. And then I think action started being held. After living in denial, I'll talk a lot of great things about TVC, but I'll talk about things that weren't so great. TVC lived in denial for many years, about what was happening. And in 2019, Ryan Callahan brought in UC Davis to do a comprehensive study of what was really going on here. And I think the results shocked people. They said, look, by 2030, so this was completed in 2021, took 2 years, COVID slowed it down a bit, but they said, look, 2/3 of your vineyards are coming out within the next 5 years. And there's nothing that's going to stop that from happening. That was shocking news, but the report, which is lengthy, and I encourage everyone to read it, it identified fundamental flaws, structural issues on why vineyards were coming out when other vineyards were elsewhere in California were staying in the ground. And one of them, I guess you could call it wishful thinking, but the authors of the South Livermore Valley Area Plan had a fundamental assumption that everything could be accomplished at small scale. So that the wine country would be successful if outside the city limits, no hotels could be bigger than 14 rooms. No restaurants could have more than 49 seats. The average size of the vineyard might only be 10 acres, which it turned out to be. And the maximum size of a typical winery could not be more than 20,000 square feet, despite the fact that a similar mid-sized winery in Napa or Sonoma is 3 times larger than that amount. And so it was a great idea that somehow we could save wine country and not have mid-sized wineries or hotels, lodging, destination restaurants, but it was naive. And UC Davis pointed out that none of these subscale businesses are likely to ever pencil out for the owners, so they're either not going to be built or they're not going to be able to survive. And the problem with that is then you're missing the key wine country services that are absolutely essential to build your reputation and to build your visitation and all the things that go along with being successful, the things that Paso Robles was able to do over the last 20 years from a starting point that was no different than Livermore Valley. Close proximity to a major metropolitan area. We had better water. I mean, they're suffering from that now. But we had a plan that had results. And so as a result, we only have, outside the city limits, we only have one lodging establishment, Purple Orchid. It's a hidden jewel. There are no destination restaurants. The small vineyards proved extremely expensive to farm. And I think Davis was shocked at that, but you lack the scale of farming, and we lack the competition of having multiple commercial farming companies competing for the vineyard business that we had. So I think bigger is once we got up to 4,000 acres, we no longer had, once the out-of-area wineries stopped buying the fruit, we had no processing here because we had no mid-sized wineries because they were banned under the area plan that could actually process the grapes from 4,000 acres. We had the processing we had originally, which was good for 1,000 acres, but no more. And so, that is, I think, the cold facts of the reality of why vineyards are coming out, but what are we doing about it? And I think working with Davis and working with the Wine Growers Association, TVC has studied these issues for the past 5 years, and we've developed a coordinated plan to mitigate them. After many years, way too many years, and countless meetings, the county lifted the restrictions on building mid-sized wineries. The citizens of Livermore voted to extend a sanitary sewer into wine country. That was the first question the professors from Davis asked, which is, what's your sewer system like? How are you going to support agritourism? You can't build a hotel without a sanitary sewer. You can't have a Mustards or a Bricks, let alone a French Laundry restaurant without a sanitary sewer system. TVC led that effort. The voters concurred by a 2-to-1 margin, and now all we have to do is get the funding and get it built. But that also allows us to build the destination restaurants. Again, another missing piece of our service deal. Brandy, by the way, who has done a fantastic job with the Wine Growers Association. I've been here a long time. I've liked all the directors, but we've never had one of the capabilities of Brandy and the drive and the passion for this region. And for the first time, again, the Wine Heritage District, which the city, I see several of our city officials here, kindly agreed to administer. For the first time, we actually have a stable, reliable funding source for the area to help promote and just keep stability in the leadership. TVC with the wine growers have brought in consulting winemakers, consulting viticulturalists like Luca to help the small wineries improve their quality and their consistency, which were other key things about, we don't want our reputation as a hit or miss region. It looks poorly on the quality of our grapes, which limits the demand for our grapes. And then I think the part that Brandy hit upon, because it's like, how do we get the grapes replanted? That's the real question, is we have to go back to the roots of what can we do in the Livermore Valley better than any other region in California, and possibly as good or better than many of the regions in the world like Loire. The selected varieties, Cabernet Franc, Sauvignon Blanc, have long storied histories in Livermore. They were the ones that UC Berkeley, which was the Vit College before Davis, thought that should be planted here in the first place. And so we've gone back to them, and the hope is that we're going to have a reason for out-of-area wineries to come in here and to buy the grapes. And further, TVC has now backed a replanting plan where they will give low-interest loans, which are very valuable in a market where it's extremely difficult to raise money for wine projects or vineyard projects, if you plant one or both of those varieties. And so, several large vineyard plantings have gone in since the UC Davis, fairly sizable Cab Franc Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. Kincannon next month starts a major replanting program for the neighbors that are there, and I recognize a few that are going to be happy. 50 acres are going in March, and another 50 will go in the following March in 27.
East Avenue?
What?
Is it on East Avenue?
No, not on East Avenue. East Avenue is a whole different animal. So that will likely be the last to be replanted. So, but we can handle some of those in the question thing. But I think we've got a plan that's working. It's going to take time. I wish we had started sooner, but we are absolutely on the right path to making Livermore Valley a sustainable and economically feasible wine country. Thank you.
And our last speaker is Diana Roberts, who's Conservation Manager at Tri-Valley Conservancy, my coworker. Diana grew up in the Bay Area, and she's always had a passion for agriculture and the environment. She attended UC Santa Cruz and graduated with a BA in Environmental Studies and a BS in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. She joined TVC in 2019 as her operations assistant after interning for the organization. So she's passionate about land preservation, sustainable agriculture, and enhancing the beauty of the Tri-Valley for generations to come. So please welcome Diana Roberts. Quickly before Diana comes up, remember to write down your questions on index cards, and Haley's going to be walking around with a basket. I do have some questions to start out with after Diana speaks, because thank you for those of you who put those in the RSVP. So with that, here's Diana.
Hello, thank you all for coming out. It is, as Becky said, an incredible turnout, and I appreciate everyone who is still standing in the back. We will make sure to keep moving. I feel like we've given a couple of introductions to Tri-Valley Conservancy as an organization, but we are your local land trust, agricultural land trust, and we protected over 6,100 acres of land here in the Tri-Valley, and that is a large part of our mission is the protection of land under a conservation easement. And so we do that in a couple of ways. We work with our partners, other landowners, and volunteers to ensure that all 114 of our properties are preserved and enhanced for future generations. And so what is a conservation easement? So this is the core of what we do is we work with local landowners on these voluntary agreements. And so they accomplish a couple of things. They accomplish protecting whatever the conservation value. So for the land that we're talking about today, it's agricultural conservation value for the area. And it protects it against development, subdivision, kind of all of the things that you would normally be doing with land to maybe make more money off of it. So we're giving a little bit of that incentive to be able to keep it in open space, habitat land, and in agricultural production. And so all are unique. Each is fit to the property itself, and each is, a working agreement between the landowner and the land trust. And a little bit of a one-on-one course. So the do's and does and does nots of a conservation easement. So for most of the conservation easements here in the South Livermore, they came out of that original South Livermore Valley Area Plan, and so they are for the protection of agriculture, and so that's what they do. They encourage agricultural production. However, they do not require constant agricultural cultivation, and so there is allowances within the conservation easement for lands to be fallowed for agricultural purposes. So if it's time for vines to come out after a nice 30 years of strong production and the production starts to decline, landowners are absolutely allowed to let that soil rest and regenerate before they plant again. And then additionally, you can have a little bit of ag supporting structures. So whether that's a barn or, a storage shed, those are definitely things that can be permitted within an agricultural easement. So it's not necessarily a blanket. You can't ever do anything but have a grape planted. And then it restricts any residential and commercial development. So this is the key aspect. A lot of you live in and around land that is under a conservation easement, and so you do not ever need to worry about commercial or excess residential development. So as was previously stated, you can have a farmhouse on a lot of these properties, but some it is just for agriculture. So you may have a building envelope, but you may not also. So it's just what the original agreement of that conservation easement was. And of course, we want to protect our environmentally sensitive areas. So this includes streams, heritage oak trees, anything that is identified as potential or actual habitat for our sensitive species within the area. And then TDC visits every year. So this is a huge part of our work is being able to go out to all 114 properties in the area every single year. We visit with property owners when they're around, but we at least walk the property, see that the property is still being used for agricultural production, that there's not any type of large violations, structures, dumping, things that would be a concern and not in line with that original agreement. And then the does not. So although we are a public land trust, that doesn't necessarily mean that conservation easements have public access. So there are definitely conservation easements that we hold. You have probably been to Sycamore Grove Park or maybe Holdner Park. We have conservation easements over that land, and you are absolutely able to visit them and enjoy them, and we encourage you to do so. But for a lot of these agricultural properties, it's still private property. So the Conservancy doesn't necessarily own anything besides that, I guess, development right that we have stripped off of the property. So they are still privately owned. And we also, the conservation easement doesn't come with all that much funding. So we don't have long-term funding. This is not, something that could keep vines planted no matter what on a property. It's still at the discretion of the property owner and at the, financial abilities of that property owner to keep it in vine. And so that is definitely a question that we've gotten, but in terms of the other aspect of that is we also don't require specific vineyard management practices. So we leave that up to the discretion of the property owner and their expertise about how to run their vineyard, their orchard, their row crop operation, whatever they choose to do. We don't have a requirement of what crop they're going to plant, how long it's planted, in what manner that's planted. We do provide resources, as was stated. We funded the consultant for wine making and vineyard consultant to be able to provide resources to local landowners. And we do want everyone to be producing at the highest and best value of their land, but there are no requirements to that. And then the thing that is the most exciting to most people is that it lives forever. So it doesn't necessarily expire with one landowner. This is a commitment that goes on the title of property and exists forever for each of the successive property owners. So it is a commitment to the region, to the community, to be able to have agricultural land basically forever, especially in South Livermore, North Livermore, South Pleasanton, all of the other places that we have conservation easements. I called out a couple of properties, but where is conserved land? So we have the majority of our agricultural conserved land here in South Livermore. So as you can see, it is this green as it goes. So the darker green is actually a mix of publicly owned or managed land, and that lighter green, these are conservation easements. So the purpose is to be able to create a nice green belt around our city that obviously enhances the beautiful neighborhoods that we live in, but also creates a natural buffer to the city of Livermore. And so they went over a little bit of our creation story about where we had our last real decline back in '93, and we have since raised that number of viticulture and orchard land that's under production, and part of that is because of that influx with the South Livermore Valley Dairy Plant and the land that was able to be put under conservation easement at that time. And then we also just gave away our first loan for our sponsored replanting program. So part of our initiatives is to make it as economically feasible to be able to continue agricultural production in this region. So that is a lot of policy work, that's a lot of negotiation and work with our local representatives, and some are here tonight. But at a very fundamental level, TDC is running this program out of its endowment to be able to make an investment within our community for our community. And so these are low interest loans to be able to replant in those signature varietals, the Soft Punk and Cab Franc. And this is just one investment, and we are looking to provide a lot more in the future to be able to get people that incentive to be able to get their vineyards started again. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
All right, so Haley, if you want to walk around and start collecting questions. And again, thank you to everyone who RSVP'd and sent us some of your questions in advance. Some of those questions I think have been answered, and some of them are repetitive, so you might not hear your exact question answered, but we're lumping them and I'm paraphrasing. So a couple questions for Dave Kent. Can you quickly, because we have a lot of questions, explain what is the difference between commercial and estate wine growing?
There are basically two broad types of vineyards out there. There are the commercial vineyards where they're actually being grown for larger scale production. They're very much focused on yields, high quality, consistent grapes. And then there's the planting that you'll see on a lot of the smaller parcels that are actually specific for different tasting rooms. And those that we call those either boutique plantings. My family, we grow 20 different varieties and clones on essentially 40 acres. And because we're growing exclusively for tasting room wines, across multiple wine brands. That's highly inefficient farming and costs a lot more, but you recover it when you sell the bottles at the proper price. For commercial farming, where you'll see the larger vineyards, I think from looking at a lot of the questions, the big removals that run along Tesla Road, those are commercial vineyards. So those are being grown for the market, which Brandy pointed out is in significant oversupply right now. There is a lot more grapes being grown than there is demand for grapes. And we've had both. And TVC has worked on a dual strategy of trying to promote both commercial grape growing and the small estate grape growing. The problem with estate grape growing is the average winery in Livermore per Davis needs 8 acres of grapes. So if you basically have 36, 38 wineries in the Livermore Valley, you're only going to have 400 or 500 acres worth of grapes. Even if we doubled that and those businesses grew, you would get back to that 1,000 acres, not the 4,000 or 5,000 acres that created a lot of widespread planting throughout Livermore and all the green areas that Diana was showing.
Thanks, Dave. Kristen, for Brandy, is there a marketing plan for Livermore's wine grapes?
There's always a marketing plan at the Livermore Valley Wine Growers Association. We are. Our big plan is visitation strategy. We want consumers here in our tasting rooms, driving through our wine country, enjoying the restaurants and all the amenities we have to offer here. As far as marketing, we are starting to adventure into a different area of marketing of our wine grapes that we haven't done a great job at, to be frankly honest, in the past. And one of the great things about this year is our new board president, Ken Wong, who is in the back there. He is a grower and has really, focused in and changed the lens a little bit to look at things from a vineyard perspective and a grape perspective, where we've had a lot of focus from a winery perspective, which we'll always have. That will never take a back seat. But to have, a co-pilot up in the front seat with us of the vineyards and growers so that we can market our grapes as well as our wines that are already bottled. We have a committee and 50% of our budget goes to marketing. So we are committed to marketing this region, our grapes and our wineries.
Great, thank you. Question for Diana. You touched on this, but just can you say a little bit more about will local conservation easements be upheld? So I think this is a really important thing to make sure everyone really understands.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely, that is what we do. So, I touched a little bit about it. So obviously, we go on our annual stewardship visits. We are able to, access each of the properties each year, ensure that they're doing exactly what they say. So we do go on annual stewardship visits to every single property every year to ensure that they are upholding their agreement. However, there are avenues that TVC can take to ensure compliance. So if a property is not compliant for one reason or another, and our negotiations with them and conversations with them are not going well, we do have avenues to ensure that that the properties are compliant eventually. So, It may or may not have been, this is an agreement, but we are a party to that agreement as well. So it is not just up to the property owner. It is the mutual agreement to ensure that the conservation easement is upheld and that the standards are being met.
Thank you. Question for Dave, and I'm gonna ask you guys to keep them a little bit shorter. Question for Dave. Are there alternate ag uses being considered for vineyard land where vines have been pulled? And maybe you can mix with that, have practices like biodynamic production or reducing pesticides been considered to differentiate Livermore Valley wine?
Yes, I mentioned briefly that when Davis originally looked at the crops, they picked organic pistachios, olives, and wine grapes. Since then, Mr. Triska is in the room. He planted a hazelnut orchard as a truffle farm and has had initially good success. So I think there are other things, but you have to put wine or water sensitivity into it. The crops that were picked were based on the fact that they're highly water efficient because we don't have an endless amount of water. And the second part of the question was?
About biodynamic practices
yeah.
or reduction of pesticides?
Well, yeah, the good news is the 50 acres going in at Kincannon in March are Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc, and they will be farmed organically. The vineyard that is still remaining on the corner at the Retzlaff entrance has been converted to an organic vineyard. Organic vineyard is not advisable for Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, some other things because we have mildew issues in Livermore. But there are certain grapes, and fortunately our focus grapes, that can be successfully farmed that way.
Great. Diana, question for you. What is the greatest barrier to keeping South Livermore protected? That's a good one.
I don't know, yeah. I would say the greatest barrier is economic barriers. So part of what a conservation easement is it's supposed to be an agreement that you don't really feel. So it's supposed to run with the natural production already happening on the property. So in order for those incentives to be there, for people to be and remain in agricultural production. So that's kind of a lot of the other periphery work we do is to ensure that those incentives are there, that those economic policy and other incentives are there so that farmers can make it and can feel enthusiastic about continuing whatever agricultural crop is on their property.
And is there a map showing which properties are under easement?
Yes, we have a map on our website, especially about that South Livermore Valley map that's also on our website, but we have conservation easement as far north as Byron, so all of that is available.
Okay, couple very specific questions. What does 2%? There's a lot of questions about specific parcels. So questions about where grapes have been removed, are they scheduled to be replanted, or is the land available for other crops? So Dave, I don't know if you want to try to take this. I mean, we cannot speak because they are private landowners. It's not our, we can't speak to who's planning what, but it does, I think Dave touched on it a little bit, and Dave, I think, has his finger on the pulse on this.
Yeah, don't expect any vineyards to be replanted in the first 2 or 3 years after they're pulled, because best practice is to go ahead and fallow that and let the land recover and heal. And after that, it's going to really be a determination of the market. And if it's under conservation easement, it's not going to grow a house. But it may not grow anything if there's nobody giving planting contracts. And that's the issue is, right now it's a big investment. TVC is trying to help with that investment by giving low interest loans because it's a very difficult time to borrow money to plant vineyards. and you would need a contract from a bona fide, financially secure winery in order to go to the bank and get any money to plant. So right now, interest rates need to come down, the industry needs to be stronger, and there needs to be some traction behind Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc to get a lot of these open fields replanted.
Yeah, and also, just as Brandy noted, we all want to support our local wineries and our neighbors and be patient with them too. They're trying to run businesses, and please, like Brandy said, please go and support them, go to your wineries, bring your guests to the area, and please have patience. And TBC and the Wine Growers Association are doing everything we can and the city to support these vineyards, and everybody wants replanting, and it will happen. Just as Dave said, it will be over time. There's been a couple questions which you touched on, Dave, about organic production. Sorry, I just lost the question. But could you speak a little bit more about what efforts are being had at pushing one region into collective certified organic farming efforts?
Yeah, there have been regions that have gone fully sustainable. This region is not focused on it, but it's an easy lift if you want to do it. Organic is a whole nother lift. And, we have an expert in the room, Luca, back there somewhere. But it's not going to, I think organic farming is going to have its place, but conventional farming is still going to be required because that's what the market is still demanding.
And Brandy's going to answer a question that I could not read.
It says, what does 2% mean? Is it per year or per population? It's neither. 2% means that the Livermore Valley Wine Heritage District was formed, and it is not a tax, it's an assessment, so it is voted in and approved by the actual businesses that are being assessed, which are the wineries in this case. So we have 38 wineries that are in the assessment district and in our assessment map. So what that means is that 2% of all of that, any of those 38 wineries, 2% of their direct-to-consumer sales in the state of California, they submit that to the city of Livermore, who then processes that for the Wine Growers Association and then passes that on to us as the assessment dollars we get quarterly that sustains the Wine Growers Association and is our source of funding.
There's a few questions about will boutique hotels be built in South Livermore? Other plans for lodging and restaurants in South Livermore? So Dave, do you want to try to take that? Nobody knows.
I love that she keeps saying Dave.
You can do it all.
No.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
I'll stand for this one.
Yeah.
Look, the suitable lodging is one of our biggest challenges. I think it's well known that we've never been named one of the best wine regions of the world because we don't meet the minimum standards of having suitable accommodations for people to stay at. Our best chance is to build the Wine Country Hotel at the Bankhead, which is downtown. It's in the city. It's connected to a sewer. It's entitled. It's ready to go. It could have been built and opened in 2017 before the COVID, but unfortunately, it got sidetracked. And now the interest rates are too high, but hopefully they'll come down and it will get entitled and it will get built. There is, with the extension of the sewer, and I know Lori Souza's in the crowd, there is no one who has worked harder at raising money and more tirelessly. Once it's complete, because no one's going to invest and borrow money and start designing a hotel until they actually physically see the sewer running along Tesla Road, which is, the high tourism district. It's improved, it's got lights, has everything we need except a sanitary sewer. I think we'll see a resort hotel operator come in quickly because the first one can get built up to 140 rooms without an environmental impact report because there's already been one done for 150 rooms. The second one is gonna have to go back through the entire thing. They're gonna have to go back to the city of Livermore, the voters, and say, do you wanna add more capacity to your sewer system? Do you want another one? But the first one gets built, I think, very quickly once the sewer line is built.
And this was a question, do we have any timeline for the sewer being built? I know there's people from the city here, and Lori.
So the project is in design right now. We're expecting the design to be completed by the end of this calendar year, and then we will move into construction phase. And this is a cooperative project between the city of Livermore and the county.
Brandy, I want to ask you a few questions. Should we consider area-wide brokers, which can help find buyers for the local grapes? Yeah.
I think that's definitely on the table to consider that. I think we've also talked about ways that we can somehow, as an association, market the grapes that are for sale beyond Livermore into other areas that are looking for our specific varietals. I think as David mentioned, and I think aptly so, how the TBC has partnered with us on our signature varietals. I think those are places we can shine. I mean, I have to say, I think almost everything grows amazing here in Livermore. We could have picked 10 different signature varietals. We chose those intentionally and with purpose. And I think that as we continue to get those planted and start to see some growth there, I think being able to collaborate together to market those outside of our region to continue to support those vineyards will be a plan that we do for sure.
And related to that, someone wrote, in the past, Livermore wineries have bought cheap grapes from outside the area. Do you have a statement about that, or is that how can we get that to change?
Well, I hope that's not happening. I'm not aware of that. I'm sure it has happened. I think there's a lot of pride in Livermore Valley fruit at this time. I'm not sure exactly when that was or what they're referring to in that question or the timeline of that, but I do know that, we changed our name several years ago to be Livermore Valley Wine Community, and we did that for a reason. We're committed to this place, to these grapes, and I think for the most part, with the caveat that it is still a business and some people have to do what they have to do to stay in business and do what they need to do, I think for the most part, wineries here are committed to use their fruit, to use the fruit that's in Livermore. And we have a lot of programs and a lot of marketing things that requires it to be Livermore Valley fruit, or we don't market it. So there's some of that in place at the wine growers level that ensures that protection to protect, promote, and advance the fruit and wines of Livermore Valley. So.
And related, don't sit down, is Diablo Highlands still being considered for marketing of the AVA?
As a name?
Yeah.
At this time, it is not one of the top things that are being considered, and we are Livermore Valley AVA at this point, and that has not been a topic of discussion for over a year, I think, maybe longer.
I want to crack at that.
Okay.
Just because there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. So the Livermore Valley, when it was established as an AVA, was just the Livermore Valley. Then about 20 years later, it included parts of the Castro Valley, all of the San Ramon Valley, the Little Valicitos, which we call Sonol Valley, Amador Valley. It was done without anyone reviewing it, probably would have never passed today. There was no science behind it. It includes the summit of Mount Diablo is in the Livermore Valley. I never knew that. So there was an effort to bring the Livermore Valley back to its original Livermore Valley watershed, but the government required that if you do that, people who you would kick out, people from Castro Valley who are currently in the quote Livermore Valley, would have to agree to a name. The name they agreed to was the Mount Diablo Highlands. Any wine grown in Livermore could also be labeled as the Mount Diablo Highlands. It was great. TBC sponsored it, spent a lot of money, hired the foremost Napa law firm to do it, but there were a small number, but very vocal people in the Livermore Valley wine grower community who didn't see that as being to their advantage. Because it would, if there's more demand, if you have Mount Diablo Highlands grapes, there's a chance that somebody in Napa or Sonoma might buy those grapes and make wine. And then the price of the grapes would go up for the local wineries. So it was opposed. But it's still sitting out there. It could happen, but it's part of the commercial strategy. And I think right now the focus is how do you keep the small wineries going and just to keep harmony in the valley. Everyone said, let's just work on the sustainability of the local wineries. But just to be clear, there are no Livermore Valley appellated wines being sold literally anywhere else in the US, but in this valley. I mean, the big wineries I worked for, the big winery that's based here, they use Central Coast because you have to blend across Paso Robles and Monterey, and that's the appellation that means something to the consumers outside of our village here. So it's an ongoing issue.
Agree.
Now everyone's favorite subject, water. Where will the ag water be distributed with the vineyards in fallow? Will we get it back from the state? And then a related question, there's been a large increase in multifamily housing in Livermore at the same time that vineyards are being pulled. In the near future, water needs may balance out. However, how much consideration is given to the distribution of water in terms of drought, plenty and drought? Do we have it? So I will say that TDC and
They're unrelated issues.
with the Livermore.
Ag water and potable water for the city
Yeah.
are unrelated.
We do a lot of, we spend a lot of time at Zone 7, I'll say that, and, but he's right, they are unrelated, they're two different things, and I would imagine, if there's water not being used on fallow land, I don't know that it would lessen what's being used.
Livermore has used far less ag water than it's been allocated for years. That doesn't change your allocation. It's not a use it or lose it situation. We have it because one day we hope to replant all those acres and we'll need it.
And I do encourage people who are more interested to attend Zone 7 meetings. They're public, and TVC, along with Wine Growers Association, has been lobbying to keep ag water rates down. We were last year successful at keeping those rates stable, and we worked this year to keep them as low as possible, and we're going to continue to do that work. So just wanted to add that. And then lastly, do you want to do one more spin around in case there are any last questions, and then we'll get to the wine and cheese. There are, a number of questions, we've touched on it, but a little bit about planting alternative crops that could be viable here, and also questions about rejuvenating soil biome that I think are really interesting. Diana, do you want to just quickly talk about what TVC is doing on looking at other ag?
Sure, yeah, no, as I stated before, our conservation easements are not restricted to one type of agricultural crop. So part of what we are looking at doing is finding kind of these gap crops that will help rejuvenate the soil faster. So not necessarily a replacement for the desired crop, but definitely an enhancing crop that will help tide the vineyard over, enhance the soil matter as it is, or even enhancements around current vineyard operations. There's lots of different hedgerows, roses that can act as good pollinators for the area, and so those are absolutely crops or plants that we definitely encourage on all properties to be able to have a more regenerative soil composition.
I think that about wraps it up. I know that, again, there were some specific questions about specific properties that we just are unable to answer at this time. We want the conversation to continue, so please, everybody, we're going to pull out some cheese and wine. Please stay, talk to your neighbors, talk to us, and thank you again for coming. And we will have a recording available that we'll send out to everybody, and you can share with your neighbors as well. So thank you so much.